All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at something pretty interesting, a detailed but fictional Wikipedia article about a potential second Trump presidency. What we're going to do is break down how this one specific document portrays that future, from day one all the way through its major policy fights.
Okay, so the first thing that just jumps right off the page is the sheer speed of things. According to the article's introduction, we're talking over 200 executive orders signed in just the first 8 months. That number alone sets a tone of really rapid, decisive change.
And that incredible pace? Well, it leads directly to the central theme that the article establishes. This is a direct quote from the source, and it really frames the entire narrative. A presidency defined by this constant push to expand executive authority and the friction that creates with the courts. This is the lens through which the article presents everything that follows. So, the article builds this whole story across 5 key areas. You've got the presidency of action, then the big domestic policy shakeup, this Liberation Day economy, the America First foreign policy, and finally, a constant focus on ethics, loyalty, and the law. So first up, let's talk about that sheer pace of action. The article portrays the start of the term as just an unprecedented sprint, using executive authority to try and roll out a massive agenda right from the get-go. And to really put that speed into perspective, the article shows us this comparison. 26 executive orders signed on day one. Compare that to just 9 for Biden and only 2 for Obama. This data is used to frame the administration's whole approach as a kind of shock and awe campaign to reshape the government from the very beginning. Now, this flurry of action wasn't random at all. According to the source, it was aimed squarely at shaking up domestic policy, specifically targeting immigration, the way federal agencies are structured, and the civil service itself. And the scope of these changes, at least as they're detailed in the article, was just massive. The source points to things like nationwide ICE raids and mass deportations, deploying federal forces to major cities, and mass firings of civil servants, including, get this, 17 independent inspectors general all on a single day. It also covers pulling out of the Paris Accords and new restrictions on healthcare.
You know, a centerpiece of this domestic agenda, as it's described in the article, was creating a whole new federal department, the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. The article notes it was briefly overseen by Elon Musk and was given this powerful mandate to cut spending, slash bureaucracy, and manage mass layoffs of federal workers.
Now, the article makes a really crucial point here about how this new government was staffed. It details a specific loyalty test for new hires that went way beyond just typical qualifications. They were asked for campaign examples and even social media handles. And for top security jobs, the source reports that applicants were asked directly about the 2020 election and January 6th. That signifies a huge shift in how the civil service was being filled. This overhaul of government personnel went hand in hand with a whole new economic strategy. The Wikipedia entry calls it the Liberation Day economy and says it was built on 3 main pillars: tax cuts, deregulation, and some pretty aggressive tariffs. A key piece of legislation that gets mentioned is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBB. The article explains that this law made the tax cuts from the first term permanent, but it also added a new 20-hour per week work requirement to Medicaid, and according to the source's own citation, was projected to add $3 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. The source also details a major fiscal battle, the government shutdown of late 2025. This timeline lays out the key moments, from when the funding first lapsed to the legal fights over benefits, and finally a Senate compromise that ended the 43-day shutdown. And this brings us to trade, where the article highlights some really dramatic shifts. It describes a strategy of using super high tariffs as a negotiating tool, pointing to a reduction on Chinese goods from 145% all the way down to 30%, while a new agreement with the EU set a 15% tariff rate. This kind of transactional approach on trade, well, it extended right into foreign policy. The article describes a return to America First, which it characterizes as this interesting mix of both isolationism and, believe it or not, expansionism. So here's how the source breaks down that policy in action. With NATO, any allies not hitting their spending targets wouldn't be defended. Peace talks about Ukraine were described as favoring Russia. Aid to South Africa was suspended, and in the Middle East, the article notes increased support for Israel alongside a brokered ceasefire. And then you get that expansionist element. The article lists several pretty controversial ideas it says were floated, including things like annexing Canada, purchasing Greenland, which the source quotes as being an absolute necessity, and even reclaiming the Panama Canal, citing excessive rates. As you can imagine, all of these policies created constant friction, which brings us to the final theme that really runs through the entire article, this intersection of ethics, loyalty, and the law. The source details a ton of legal challenges and major concerns about conflicts of interest. And the source gives specific examples here, describing what it calls a pay-for-access operation run through the Mega Inc. PAC. It cites a sugar import ban being lifted after a $1 million donation and a Medicare rule change getting delayed after a $5 million donation. It even mentions a joint promotion of Tesla vehicles on the White House lawn. And this brings us full circle, right back to that central theme from the beginning, the conflict with the courts. The article uses this direct quote to kind of summarize the outcome of all those legal battles it documented, stating that judges found many of the administration's actions to be illegal and unconstitutional. The crucial point here isn't whether this future is going to happen, but what the creation of such a detailed, source-filled document tells us about the anxieties, the expectations, and the political fault lines of right now. It's a fascinating reflection of our current moment, captured in the format of a history book written before the histories even happened.